First of all, we all want to thank Congresswoman Giffords, who's had a very busy and arduous week this week on all the contentious topics in this state. So thank you so much for ordering this report, and thanks to the GAO staff for their hard work. We believe, the Coalition for a Safe and Secure Border, that this report clearly confirms that the Border Patrol is proceeding without adequate information on the effectiveness of the fixed checkpoints and their adverse impacts on public safety and the quality of life in southern Arizona. I'd like to point out something that perhaps GAO didn't touch on. Green Valley, Serena, and Tubac are some of the fastest growing areas in our state. So to characterize these as rural communities with a scant population is very misleading when we're planning for a permanent checkpoint, perhaps, that would be here for many, many years. We've already seen in Southern California that because the traffic gets jammed at the checkpoints, they're shut down. And I think that proves Rich's point beautifully, that when they're shut down, the smugglers know right when to go through them. And if other local law enforcement agencies were able to apprehend them, as was given the example in his example, then why can't we do that here? Clearly they had the authority and they were able to get those drug shipments during the downtime of the checkpoint. I think also the report cites many errors which we'll submit in writing in our letter to the Congresswoman on the cost effectiveness and doesn't really, it hints but doesn't really compare other Border Patrol strategies because this type of data isn't available. The GAO did find that the Border Patrol had overstated its checkpoint performance in 2007 and 2008 fiscal years. And I quote, "Until these actions are completed," meaning improving data collection, "the integrity of the CPB and the accountability system in regard to checkpoints is unclear." I think this is what the community is saying. We're willing to work with you on whatever tactics are most effective, but we disagree with the fundamental approach that it's okay for 70% of the criminals to get across our borders. That's just not acceptable to us as U.S. citizens. We don't live in Mexico, we live in the United States, and we expect our government to protect us at the border. The report also reiterates that 94% of the seizures are occurring around the checkpoint, while only 6% at the checkpoint itself. So exactly what we have been saying about pushing this illegal activity into our communities is verified by the GAO data. The same with apprehensions, 72% around the checkpoint, only a 7% increase at the checkpoint, and then drug seizures rose 27% in surrounding areas, only 8% at the checkpoint. Our big broad valley is becoming an alternative corridor for this illegal activity. We also want to mention, we also want to mention the need to do a complete NEPA review and further analysis, because we believe our safety, our business, and our real border security is at stake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Ms. Walden. I know the 70% number or 30% number you mentioned, that was not specific to Border Patrol or Border Patrol checkpoints. That was a measure that's used at the ports of entry. It doesn't come into this fight, if you will.
At the ports of entry, the federal goal is to detect and apprehend 30% of major illegal activity. And this shows the need for a three-tiered strategy.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, we can't hear you. Could you just speak a little bit closer to the mic? Thank you.
Also, as far as the amount of seizures that occur at the actual checkpoint, as I just touched on a moment ago, without that checkpoint there, everything at the checkpoint and in the flanking areas around the checkpoint is gone. Because without that checkpoint, they are on I-19. And they're outside of our enforcement zone. And they're into our communities, and then they're into our country. And it's the checkpoints that has taken the routes of egress away from the smugglers. It's putting them into the more remote areas, which is why the number of our seizures have gone up dramatically. And in reference to when the checkpoint went down to weather and DPS was able to get 5 loads, that wasn't by accident. In the law enforcement community, we collaborate on these things. Director Vanderpool and I have had many discussions about exactly, we know the smugglers watch us, we know that. And when we have to tear down the checkpoint for safety, what can we do to mitigate it? And that's what we're doing. It's not just DPS, it's all law enforcement in the I-19 corridor. But that, there again, that doesn't happen by accident, that happens by collaboration, and that's something that we're working towards. As I mentioned, we're going down this process, we're going to continue to get better at it. And I think the checkpoints do bring a lot of value, and it's, if they weren't there, those drugs and those illegal aliens are into our country.
Harry Peck, please.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And there are a couple of people I'd like to take a second or two to thank, other than Representative Giffords, who's been thanked enough. Ron Barber has been an absolute gem and jewel. He has helped me every step of the way in my research. And Ron, you are a prize.
Yay!
My eyes aren't so good. I think I see Pia Carasoni there. And it was nice of her to come down and meet with us in Tuba. And finally, I want to thank Adam Hoffman for spending so much time with me in the telephone and listening to what I had to say, and also carefully considering, he said, and I believe him, the documentation that I sent him concerning effectiveness and studies about it. I'd like to make just a couple brief points, and I'd like to ask one question. On the first page in the preamble, in the second paragraph, the data does not indicate, quote, if checkpoints are operating efficiently and effectively. And secondly, they refer to the overstatement of checkpoint performance. If it's not operating efficiently and effectively, and we can't prove that, then why are we considering spending $40 million for a permanent checkpoint? It assumes, for one thing, that we will never succeed at the border, and it assumes that this problem will be with us forever. Let's hope that isn't the case. And a second comment is that the GAO has talked about the difficulty of accumulating data. But there's one item of data, particularly about drugs, that is very obvious. The fact of the matter is that the United States is the largest per capita user of marijuana and cocaine in the world. In the world. And a place like the Netherlands, who has different policies, uses half as much per capita. Finally, I would like to ask what I think is an important question. In the report, at footnotes 59 through 62, they refer to an environmental assessment. And they talk about an environmental assessment having been made and an opportunity for public comment having been made. Neither I nor anybody I've talked to has heard a word about this environmental study. Nobody I know has seen it, and I would appreciate it if Representative Giffords would work with Chief Gilbert and perhaps with the GAO and get me a copy of it. Because I've tried to get information from the Border Patrol through the Freedom of Information Act, and as far as I can tell nationwide, they don't pay any attention to FOIA. However, I think this is important. And I don't know where it was published in the paper. I don't know where it was, when it was done, and I don't know what it consisted of. But I think I'd like to have it. And if you look at footnotes 59 through 62, it'll be described. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And we appreciate what you do as being a community watchdog. I know you put a lot of time and effort into looking after your community.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you for the kind words about Adam. It's something we already know and treasure about Adam. He listens to everybody. With regard to the footnotes that you mentioned, those pertain to the Texas checkpoints, not to the checkpoint plans for I-19. That process is not far enough along to require those kinds of studies. And I believe that the products that we cite in those footnotes are publicly available, and perhaps after the meeting we can talk about how to go about getting them.
At the ports of entry, the federal goal is to detect and apprehend 30% of major illegal activity. And this shows the need for a three-tiered strategy.